Welcome to Eyes on Books. I'm so glad you're joining us this morning, and I do think you will enjoy hearing about our choice of book. The title is Once Upon a Villa, and we're going to take a nice little travelogue through the French Riviera. My name is Elaine Schnitter. I'm going to be one of your hosts, and my co-host this morning is John Peters. So we will be telling you about the book, a little bit about the story and the background, and then we'll have the pleasure of interviewing the author, Andrew Kaplan. So I think the whole program will be very enjoyable for everyone. So John, would you like to tell us about the author, perhaps? Or?
Sure. Andrew Kaplan, I think, is what every writer fantasizes about. Wildly successful, having your books turned into TV shows, hobnobbing with the elite in Hollywood. I mean, he's done it all. He really has. And full disclosure, I met Andrew when I was president of the Palm Springs Writers Guild. He was a member of the Guild, and he was in the screenwriting section. And we became friends over the course of a couple of years, and I thought he would be a very interesting author for us to interview, and reached out to him, and he graciously agreed to do that. His Scorpion series about spy thrillers is phenomenal, and then his Homeland series also became the TV show based on his Homeland writings. So he's kind of done a little bit of everything, and he's still active. He's working on a series right now for television, and he just stays active. He's sort of like the Energizer Bunny. He just keeps on going. But the book, Once Upon a Villa, I think is really interesting because here's a guy who had a 2.5-year-old child, had basically said to his wife, let's just get rid of everything and move to the French Riviera. I mean, who would do that? But he did, and he was working on a book, and he had sort of a writer's block for a long time on that book. So here's a guy from Brooklyn who also did work for the IDF in Israel, had an advertising firm that didn't quite work out, and they just kind of chuck it all and go to the French Riviera. And from there, the story is just fascinating.
It is. It's amazing because here he is in this gorgeous, idyllic location, surrounded by very interesting people, beautiful climate, beautiful architecture, and he is writing a book while he's there that's a spy thriller that takes place in Cambodia. So it was kind of a juxtaposition of here he was enjoying this new life, and then he goes down to his writing room and starts thinking more about Cambodia and the Golden Triangle. So that kind of gave the whole book a different slant. I liked that, that there were both things, and how he was doing both, I don't know. I mean, that's a lot.
Well, it's a lot, and that juxtaposition, I think, didn't end with just being in the French Riviera writing about Cambodia and that Golden Triangle, but, here you are, sold all your stuff, and now you're on, quote, the beach with billionaires, so there's another juxtaposition, and he's hobnobbing with locals and diplomats and everybody else. I mean, talk about a fish out of water. I mean, there is sort of the poster child for that.
Yes, but what I finally realized was the reason, I think, part of the reason that he was able to make inroads with so many people is the French really respect writers. They hold writers in high esteem, and people had read his work already before he got there. So he was accepted on that basis. And then the other thing that seemed to come through was the French, the adult people with whom he socialized, they absolutely adored Justin, the 2.5-year-old son. They loved him and they went out of their way for him. Waiters and bartenders, everyone just loved this child and made everything special for him. So I think those two things allowed him to become, at least initially, embedded into this society and culture. And then once people got to know him and his wife, they also liked her. Things worked out.
Oh yeah, I agree. Now you've been to the French Riviera, right?
Yes, right around that time that he was there, a few years before that.
So this was kind of like a throwback for you to read this book.
It was. It brought it back in a good way. Yeah. I didn't see Brigitte Bardot in Saint-Tropez, but I do remember walking along there and looking at the yachts. And we even spent a couple of nights in Monte Carlo, and I did go to the casino one night.
Wow.
Which I'm not a gambler, I never was, but just the aura of that place was something. Very quiet, very sedate. You know you're not in Vegas for sure when you go there.
Well, I think the setting is so rich.
It is, yes.
And I think he captured a lot of that. I mean, it's almost like a dialogue between the reader and himself.
Yes.
And he explained things, and there's enough French sprinkled through the book that it's almost like French 101 if you looked up everything. And I don't speak French, but I had to look up a few things. So it was enriching.
Yeah, and the food and the wine and the camaraderie and the culture is so different. People just get together for lunch, and lunch can go on for hours. He said the record that he had for lunch was 12 hours.
I can't even imagine.
They went, I think, from one place to another. It's just a different way of life. And he didn't have a 9-to-5 job where he had to be in an office somewhere every day. He was free to write when the spirit moved him, I suppose, or when he absolutely had to, which eventually that happened. And he would do that when the time was right. So they had this open day for themselves to do what they wanted.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. He was under contract to write this book, and he was having, as I mentioned earlier, sort of a mental block, and then he changed his focus, and it started to come to him. But deadlines are just that, deadlines, and you have to meet it. I can't imagine the tension that he had. He had this deadline, but yet you're in this idyllic place, and you know you have to go over to your desk and write, but you really want to be out and play with the folks and enjoy the... I mean, that really had to be some tension in his life, I would think.
Yes, and it was quite a different environment, going from the cafe, having a 3-hour lunch, and then going in his writing room, which in the first villa they lived in was in the basement and was closed off. So that was kind of a isolating place for him. But I guess that's what he needed. But it was so different from the cafe and having lunch for 4 hours.
Yeah, in reading it, at times I thought, this is like going to college your first year and living in a dorm.
Yeah.
You know, you're stuck in the basement or you're stuck in a corner, and your freedom is once you get outside the building and you can go and eat and join your friends and do whatever. And it's somewhat of an analogy there for me in this setting.
Oh, I agree. That I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. Yeah, you're tied down, and you've got to get the work done, and you've got to get the assignments finished and get them in. But then once you do, you escape.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
that's when the fun begins.
Well, I guess we should get the author on screen and talk a little bit to him about this magnificent book. for our viewers, Andrew Kaplan is a New York Times best-selling author. And as I said earlier, he has done it all. His books have been translated into other languages. His Scorpion series is just fabulous. If you're into spy thrillers, this is a real deal. You really need to go and look at that. Andrew lives over in the Coachella Valley, and he's hobnobbed not only on the French Riviera, but with everybody in Hollywood, I believe, too. So I guess we should welcome him to our show. Your willingness to come on today and talk about Once Upon a Villa. So I have a burning question to ask you after I've read the book. And what possessed you to suddenly say to your wife, let's just sell everything and grab our 2.5-year-old and go to the French Riviera?
My wife and myself had history in France. I lived in Paris and was a journalist for the International Herald Tribune based in Paris. And I was covering stories in Europe, covering Cold War, going to Berlin, Paris, covering the wars in Africa, in Algeria and the Congo and so on. And I spoke French. So, and my wife, Anne, also had been to France a number of times, and this was before we ever met. And so we both had history in France, and we both loved the country. And it was always a fantasy of ours that maybe someday to live in France. But we were never really going to act on it until that time when I broke my foot.
Well, I guess there's something there for our viewers. If you break your foot, move to the French Riviera. I guess that's the subliminal message.
I have this line in the book that good luck and bad luck often come wearing each other's clothing. You don't always know what you're getting. And I believe that's absolutely true. And in my case, breaking my foot turned out to be an enormous stroke of good luck. Although at the time, it caused me to lose the job I had, and we were living on unemployment, and it was just a very difficult time. And I was trying to figure, and what I really wanted to do was just right. And I thought the cost of living would be a little better in France, and so that's where the idea came from.
Fascinating.
Yeah, that was quite a leap of faith, but I was thinking the timing was probably pretty good as far as Justin was concerned, because a 2.5-year-old is more portable than a child. Once they start regular school, it's not so easy to just pick up and go somewhere. Preschool is an easier time.
Absolutely. We knew that until he went to school, he was, we could take him anywhere. And we actually thought that we might stay in France and he would just go to French schools. And in fact, we put him into a creche, which is like a French preschool, and he began to learn to speak French and so on. So that actually was happening while we were living there.
A nice experience for him. And for you as well.
I tried to keep him talking French, but he didn't want to. Later, he regretted it, but at the time, he was very stubborn.
By how kind everyone was to him. They just loved the idea of this little child. The bartenders, the waiters, the restaurant owners, people really went out of their way for him, which I think is wonderful. I just love that idea.
Well, I think the French and the Italians all love children. I think it's a misnomer to think that they don't. They tend to treat their children a little differently than we do, but they absolutely love them. And Justin was a very attractive, very charming child. In fact, one of the professional reviewers of this book said he steals every scene he's in, and I believe that's true.
Yeah, that was really, really lovely. I enjoyed seeing him with people, adults. He seemed to get along really well with adults. He did really well with them. and he liked music. They gave him in the Brazilian restaurant. He was up there on the stage, moving around.
Well, that was wonderful.
Yeah, he was, and he did steal the scene a few times for sure.
When did it come to your attention that this wasn't just a chapter in your life that you were living through, but it could be a book? What happened there?
There was a period when I didn't do any writing for a long time for a variety of reasons. And when I wanted to go back and start writing again, I decided that writing a novel would be too hard. So I thought, let me write about something that actually happened, because then I could just describe what happened. And I have an advantage in that while we were living there, I would write letters every week to my mother, kind of telling her what was going on. So and when my mother died, I came across this whole batch of letters that she had saved, that I had sent her. And so I had those letters to refer to refresh my memory. And so I thought, let me just see if I can get this down and see if anybody likes it.
People who write many times say they have to have a rhythm. They have to be in the mood. They have to just, sit down and everything has to come together. How did that work for you? Here you are in the French Riviera, one of the most beautiful places you can think of. You're under a contract to write a book. You have a deadline. How did you balance going into a corner maybe somewhere or at your desk and disciplining yourself to write in such a great environment?
When we started this whole thing, I had no idea we were going to sell the book. And when we first went to London, just so I could see my agent there. And while we were there is when we learned that she had sold the book based on the one chapter I had sent her, which never seemed to happen, but it did. And then suddenly we were signing contracts and I had to write this thing. And all it was an idea. And I thought, well, how am I going to do this? And especially there are so many distractions, as you say, on the French Riviera. And but you set yourself a time every day in the morning. You sit down and you go to work, and I would work till around noon, and then I'd have the rest of the day to play.
You still follow that schedule? Writing every day?
Not rigorously anymore. I've gotten older, and also I'm starting to write different things as well as spy thrillers, as this book is an example. But at the same time, we just did a deal with A&E Network for a TV series based on my book, Blue Madagascar. And so now everybody's pressing me to write a sequel to Blue Madagascar. And so I'm having to deal with that, plus some other books that I'm trying to get out at the same time. So it's insane to be this busy at my age, but here it is.
Well, the writer's life continues, I guess, is the best way we can look at that.
Yeah.
How is it different today than it was earlier in your career?
I think it's night and day. The publishing industry, like the entertainment industry, like all Hollywood, they've all changed so radically. It's not the same business anymore. You've got so many books coming out. You've got like 10,000 books a day coming out on Amazon. You've got, you've got consolidation in the industry. There's only 3 major publishing houses in New York. There's, everything's consolidated. Everything's become genre, romance, fantasy, or whatever. It's become very, very specific, And the numbers are much, much smaller. People don't read as much.
I know quite a few of my friends and I do the audios. And by the way, the audio was wonderful. The reader did a great job. I liked that a lot in Once Upon a Village.
He worked quite a lot on his French, yes, but he did a good job.
Yes, so it was well done. It was very well done. I like the audio.
What would you say to a reader who's thinking about getting Once Upon a Villa? What would you say to them as to why they should pick it up and read it?
First and foremost, because I think it's fun. I think it's fun. I think it's very funny. I think it's like having a vacation on the French Riviera without having to travel and spend all that money. And also because you're going to meet a class of people and a way of life that hardly exists anymore, but that existed then. You meet royalty and you meet billionaires and you meet famous people and you meet ordinary but very interesting and eccentric people and expats, and it's just a fascinating story. And then the most incredible things happen, and the amazing part is that it's all true.
Well, Andrew, since we have you here with our viewership, maybe you could say a word about your Scorpion series, because you're really well known for that series as well.
Scorpion has this very interesting sort of backstory. He is an American boy who, because of circumstances where his father, who's an oil man, gets killed in the Arabian desert, and he's raised, and he's an orphan, and he gets raised by this Bedouin tribe in Arabia. And that leads him into a career where he winds up in the CIA and then becomes an ex-CIA agent. And he's the guy they come to when they've got the absolutely toughest assignments possible. And for example, in Scorpion Betrayal, there's the most dangerous terrorist in the world, and he's threatening, and they know there's a nuclear threat, but they don't know who he is. They don't know what his name is. They don't know what he looks like. They don't know his nationality. They don't know anything about him. He could be anywhere in the world. They don't know what his target is. Could be any city in the world. And Scorpion only has 2 weeks to find him.
Oh, wow.
And so that's the challenge. So it was kind of mano a mano, the most dangerous terrorist in the world, because he's very intelligent, versus the best secret agent in the world. And it's one-on-one. And I thought that would make an interesting story.
A contrast to the French Riviera. I mean, that is just amazing. I mean, your mind must work on different levels of fantasy, thrillers, abstraction, and reality.
The way I got into writing spy thrillers was I kept sending stories and book projects to various agents and publishers, and I never got published. But a lot of editors would write to me personal notes, not just the standard form, thank you, good luck elsewhere, but personal notes saying how much they love my writing, but there was, for whatever reason, some reason why they couldn't publish this particular story or book or whatever. And one of them finally suggested to me, it's much easier to get published if you write in a genre. What do you like to read for personal pleasure? And I liked spy thrillers. I liked Ian Fleming. I liked Eric Ambler. And, above all, I liked John le Carré, who had shown that you could write serious books that could also be in the spy thriller genre. And so I resolved to do that, to write a serious book that was in the spy thriller genre, and then that got published as Hour of the Assassins, and that kind of launched me as a spy thriller writer. But as I've gotten older, I've started to explore, other avenues. Like I've got a book out now to publishers that's a historical fiction book set in the Middle Ages, and I've got another one that I'm working on that is set during in China during World War II and the Communist Revolution. I'm exploring different avenues now. Well, my agent's still pulling me back and saying, no, write a sequel to Blue Madagascar.
Mm-hmm.
You knew the story about Once Upon a Villa. And sometimes when we live the story and we know the story, it's harder to write about than when we're writing about something that's fictionalized. Which was harder? Was it harder to write about the villa and the French Riviera, or is it harder to come up with ideas to write about Scorpion?
Scorpion's much harder. Same with Homeland, and so to write a really good thriller, one that sustains suspense, where you hook the reader from the first page, from the first paragraph, from the first line, and you pull the reader all the way through, never let them go. You try to write the kind of book that people say I couldn't put it down, and just one more chapter before I go to bed, and next thing you know, it's 4 a.m. That's the kind of books I write, and the kind of books I like to write.
We're out of time, so we really thank you for your time and your volunteering to share your wonderful book and your other books with our viewership here in Laguna Woods.
Yeah, very nice meeting you, Andrew. It's a pleasure.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed hearing about Once Upon a Villa. The story itself is very comfortable, very much fun, as the author himself mentioned, and I think you would enjoy it. It's an easy read, and you can just sit back and relax and have a good time. And thanks again for coming. See you next time.